far on the microphone. I think you can hear me. Okay, can you hear me? No? My name is Tony Iannarone. I am a member of the Hall of Fame Committee, but I'm here to welcome you on behalf of the Nutley Library since I am president of the board. I think it's very fitting that we hold these ceremonies here because I'm always amazed how many of our inductees mention their years as youngsters in the Nutley Library and how much it meant to them. And that means a lot to me because when they were teenagers, I probably was already a member of the board because I've been here for over 43 years. In any event, I hope you're going to enjoy your day. Just to point out a couple of things to you that you may want to look at before you leave. Downstairs, as you get off the elevator, just to the left is the Hall of Fame tree. And that has leaves with the names of all the past and present inductees. You might want to take a look at that. Over here on the desk is a loose leaf binder, and in that are biographies and pictures of all the past award winners, and you might want to take a look at that. The ceremony, we figure, will last about 3/4 of an hour, and after that you will be treated to some really delicious foods, so don't fail to stay and enjoy all of that, and a glass of wine if you will. Okay, with that we're going to proceed to Mr. Ritacco, the chairman of the Hall of Fame Committee. Pat.
Thank you, Andrew. Good afternoon, everyone. At this time, I'd like to introduce the judges for the Nutley Hall of Fame. John Augustina, Joanne Brown, Dolores Capalbo, Joseph Servasio, Dr. John Dinan, Dr. Eileen Poliani, and Fred Scalera. Not in attendance today are Joseph Zara and Dr. Anthony Barada. This side. On this side. We,
So much for our good fortune. We got the same directions before we started this process.
Absolutely. And I'd like to introduce the Administrative Committee. Sam Carella, Phyllis Caldabella, Anthony Iannarone, Marie Labadia, and Phil White. Not in attendance today because of prior engagement is Chris Osija, and that is our Administrative Committee. We will now begin the announcing of our awardees.
The Nutley Hall of Fame, nominated for induction.
Her Lady, Dr. Bernadette A. Ferraro. Her Lady Bernadette is a lifelong resident of Nutley who attended Nutley High School and Lacader Academy. She majored in zoology at Rutgers University and completed advanced research in pathologies and pulmonary carcinomas and brain tumors at the University of Medicine and Dentistry in New Jersey. Lady Bernadette received a master's degree in medical laboratory science at the Eastern Virginia Medical School in Norfolk, Virginia, and a PhD degree while simultaneously teaching as a professor. Lady Bernadette has an extensive history of charitable affiliations, beginning at the age of 15 as a volunteer at Clara Moss Memorial Hospital in Belleville, and continuing with the Norgestad Foundation, a charity dedicated to fighting cancer on the Indian subcontinent. Determined to help disabled physicians, scientists, medical, and graduate students achieve their professional goals, Lady Bernadette founded the Ferraro Foundation for Science and the Disabled in 1997. Her Lady Dr. Bernadette Ferraro was elevated in 1994 with full royal honors into the Hospitaller Order of St. John's Knights of Malta.
Nominated for induction, the Nutley Hall of Fame.
Private Hermanus Brown. Private Hermanus Brown was born on November 28, 1761, on his family's farm in what is now the Spring Garden section of Nutley. He grew up learning the skills of farming, but in 1780 he enlisted and served as a volunteer with the Essex Militia in the war against the British. On June 7, 1780, during the Battle of Connecticut Farms that took place in Union, New Jersey, and while the British were being chased back toward Elizabeth, young Hermanus Brown was struck and killed by a cannonball. He was 18 years old and the first known soldier of Nutley to sacrifice his life in service to his new country.
Nominated for induction, the Nutley Hall of Fame.
Dr. Richard Albanese, a graduate of Nutley High School in 1958 and Princeton University in 1962, Dr. Albanese received a medical degree from Columbia University in 1967. That was the same year he recognized the urgent need for physicians in the military and volunteered to serve 4 years of active medical duty, followed by continuous civilian support with the United States Air Force. During his 39 years of dedicated federal service to his country, Dr. Albanese directed numerous exploratory research and development projects, including the study of medical effects on Vietnam veterans exposed to Agent Orange. Dr. Albanese worked and testified several times before the United States Congress in strengthening care and support to veterans with military health issues. 4 years ago, he founded the Albanese Defense and Energy Development Company, where he continues today as its lead scientist.
Nominated for induction, the Nutley Hall of Fame.
Kenneth Yulo. Ken Yulo began his theatrical year just a few steps from the library where we are sitting today. As a member of Nutley High School's class of 1957, Ken Yulo's interest in theater quickly extended up Franklin Avenue, where he was welcomed as a very young director at the Nutley Little Theater. Ken Yulo also spent many hours directing creative dramatics for children in this very room, here in the Nutley Library. Ken Yulo is the author of 13 novels that have sold more than 13 million copies. He has been honored as a Eugene O'Neill award-winning playwright with productions both on Broadway and at the Lincoln Center, as well as on stages throughout America and in Europe. Ken Yulo studied at the University of Heidelberg and joining the Frankfurt Playhouse in Germany as artistic director, touring in more than 150 productions throughout Europe with Robert De Niro, Geraldine Page, Rip Torn, Al Pacino, Dustin Hoffman, and a host of others. His book, The 5 Inevitable Elements of Acting, will be published next spring. Ken once wrote, "You can take the boy out of Nutley, but you can't take Nutley out of the boy." That boy is back with us today, Ken Yulo, for induction into the Nutley Hall of Fame.
Nominated for induction, the Nutley Hall of Fame.
Thomas Francisco, an award-winning photographer and creative graphic designer. Thomas Francisco, over a 40-year career, has developed advanced worldwide promotional marketing concepts for such clients as the BASF Corporation, Black & Decker, Jeffrey Bean, Reader's Digest, Johnson & Johnson, Lennox China, Charlene Plow, and the Sony Corporation, Van Housen, and Verizon. A founding member and past president of the American Society of Media Photographers, Thomas spearheaded the formation of a fine arts grant providing scholarships for advanced student photographers. A graduate of the Newark School of Fine and Industrial Arts, Mr. Francisco was raised in Nutley, attended Holy Family School, and graduated by Nutley High School in 1969.
Nominated for induction, the Nutley Hall of Fame.
Susan Naruki. Susan Naruki, a Grammy Award-winning internal soprano, has performed more than 100 performances with the world's leading composers, including Pierre Boulez, the Cleveland Orchestra, Michael Tilson Thomas, and the San Francisco Symphony, the Los Angeles Philharmonic, Lincoln Center in New York, and the Netherlands Opera, among others. Susan's been honored with a Grammy Award for her work with the Warsaw Philharmonic and the Cannes Award for the Best Recording of Works by a Living Composer. Susan has also won critical acclaim as the artistic director of Cuatro Corridos, appearing in San Diego, Los Angeles, Albuquerque, Tijuana, Dallas, and Mexico City. Born in Belleville and a Nutley resident for more than 20 years, Susan presently serves on the faculty of the University of California in San Diego.
Nominated for induction, the Nutley Hall of Fame.
Jackie Paris. Born in 1925 and raised in Nutley, Jackie Paris was an American jazz singer and guitarist who performed and recorded with the biggest names in jazz, including Nat King Cole, Lionel Hampton, Charlie Parker, among others. After serving in the Army during World War II, he teamed with Nat King Cole and toured with Lionel Hampton and Charlie Parker. Jackie Paris joined Ella Fitzgerald in being named the winning vocalist in the first ever Downbeat Critics poll. Jackie Paris continued recording and performing throughout the years from the 1940s until his death in 2004.
Our first inductee, Dr. Bernadette Ferrara.
to be the recipient of the Nutley Hall of Fame is indeed okay. Not is that better? To be the recipient of the Nutley Hall of Fame is indeed a special honor, not only for myself, but for the entire Ferraro family. For in terms of a historical perspective, the Ferraro family was the first Italian immigrant to settle in Nutley in the 1880s. Therefore, in receiving this special honor, I feel that my family and I have truly achieved the American dream. At this point in time, I know that many of you have already read my biographical profile in the field of medicine and biomedical research. Therefore, the single question remains: what motivated or inspired you to pursue the study of medicine? First, I would have to say it was inspiration by example. My uncle, Dr. Frank Ferraro Sr., was the first physician in the Ferraro family. For when I was a young girl, he always took time from his busy schedule to patiently answer all of my questions about various medical diseases. And as years passed, and I matured intellectually and scientific, I came considered as a confidant and mentor. Most recently, it has been my honor to have served as the first president of our family charity, the Ferraro Foundation for Science and the Disabled. Of course, my motivation to study medicine took yet another path when I became a patient at Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore. There, for the first time, I developed professional and intellectual associations with men like the late Dr. Victor McCusick, noted pediatric cardiologist, geneticist, and pioneer of the Genome Project. There was also Dr. John Hoops, national plastic surgeon, who, through his innovative tendon lengthening techniques, created miracles with my hands and fingers that continue to serve me well to this day. My interest in medical research was initiated by Dr. William Young, noted geneticist and medical entomologist at Johns Hopkins. He had the largest and most genetic diversified collection of Drosophila, also known as fruit flies, in the United States. In my quest to receive specimens for experimentation and study, Dr. Young often transported the fruit flies in special containers, even in the middle of winter. These Drosophila deliveries were wholly accompanied by detailed letters, which contained suggestions and answers to my many questions as my project began to unfold. Retrospect, the research that I learned engaged in this project served as a catalyst for my current project on mosquito circadian rhythms and photo period regimes in Quebec restaurants and Aedes albopictus. When I finally achieved my long-cherished dreams of medical school at UND-NJ, I studied on a postgraduate level under the guidance and mentorship of the late Michael Lyons, a noted pulmonary pathologist. Under his direction, my first book, entitled Proposed Mechanisms of Pulmonary Cancerogenesis, was written and currently resides in the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. Since I had interest in microscopy and disease processes at the submicroscopic and organelle levels, my second book, under Dr. Lyons' direction, was entitled Cilia in Normal and Pathological States. So the question remains, what do these men cited have in common, and what did I learn from them? I believe that the common denominator is they were not only professionals with internationally recognized credentials, but the exercise of their professions became analogous to a vocation. These extraordinary men pursued their medical calling and were totally immersed in it. They were one with their vocations. However, in addition to the inspiration and motivation to pursue medicine and biomedical research, there are two other people not yet mentioned here today. My father has since passed, but I know he is here with me today. He had an extraordinary philosophy of life in which he said to me, to be successful in whatever you choose, you must find romance in whatever you do. Medicine is my romance, and for this I thank my parents, Dominic and Josephine Ferraro, for their encouragement in the face of many disappointments and for their ever-present unconditional love. For everything that is good in me is because of them. Thank you so much.
Accepting the award for Private Hermanus Brown, we will have John Augustine.
I want everybody here to understand, please, that I am not an historian. But luckily, along with the other judges on our committee, we were enlightened to this wonderful story by an article published by an historian from Belleville by the name of Michael Perone, who, when he was advised by one of the ancestors of this young man of the story and did some research on it, and wrote a newspaper article which enlightened us and started us on our research, which led us to inducting him into our Hall of Fame. I'm not going to give you my own speech. What I'm going to do for you today is I'm going to read to you the publication or the letter that was sent by the relative of Mr. Jimenez Brown to Michael Perone, which launched Michael Perone's investigation. So from here on in, you can know me as Mr. Glenn Goldie. Henry Brown, my fifth great-grandfather, that's great-great-great-great-great-grandfather, 8 generations, lived in the Spring Garden section of Nutley, New Jersey, and served as a lieutenant in the 1st Regiment of the Essex County Militia. With some of the documents that he sent, I found out that their farm was located on Bloomfield Avenue and High Street. On that corner proceeding towards Kingsland Road, it ended by the Nichols Park, and it proceeded down High Street to Lake Street and made sort of a rectangle going towards the park. So it was a small farm, but he's a Nutley boy. He enlisted, Henry Brown, in the initial call for the militia in 1775 and served until the end of the war in 1783, serving in the companies of Captain Mathis Cotter, Captain Daniel Smith, Captain Chandler, and Captain Richard Townley. Henry Brown was born in Second River, now Belleville/Nutley, New Jersey on December 2nd, 1730, and was baptized at the Dutch Reformed Church in Aquaconock, now Hackensack, New Jersey. On December 13th, 1730, Henry Brown married Rachel Berger and had 2 sons, Hermanus Brown, born in 1762, and Henry Jr., my 4th great-grandfather, born in 1767. Henry Brown returned from the war, and when he died, was buried at the cemetery at the Dutch Church in Belleville, New Jersey. That's the Belleville Dutch Church, if you all know, which is by the bridge which crosses the river on Jasper Street, I think is the name of it. He is commemorated on the large plaque inside the cemetery, along with 65 other veterans of the Revolution who are buried there at the cemetery. That's an historical site, and what we have there are the men who served in the Revolutionary War of this country, and are all part of the Essex Militia, and are buried at a site that many of us are not familiar with. So there were a total of 66 people that were buried there. I was aware from family lore that Hermanus Brown, the son, had been killed in the Revolution, but there was no detail of where, when, or how. I contacted the historical societies in the area, and they had no official information other than that he may have been killed in the battle at Second River, Belleville in 1777. Knowing he would have only been 15, this did not seem correct to me. I then began an extensive research that took me into many records of the Revolution. My big hit was with the written soldier pension applications where soldiers gave depositions of their service. One of the things I learned in doing my research was that after the Revolutionary War, our wonderful Congress started a pension program for the veterans of the Revolutionary War. So as they were older and they didn't have full and complete records of who was in the Army and who served in the militias, they had men come forward and submit depositions, and based upon the depositions and what they could find as corroborating evidence, these elderly men, who some of them were injured, some of them were just old, got pensions from the United States government. I found 6 different depositions of soldiers who were at the Battle of Connecticut Farms on June 7, 1780, and told of being in the field on June 8, 1780, when Jimenez Brown was felled by a British cannonball. One of the interesting things about this is I had never heard of the Battle of Connecticut Farms. When I spoke with Mr. Carone, I found out that 50% of the battles of the American Revolutionary War were fought in the state of New Jersey. I had no awareness of this whatsoever. We've heard of all the battles that were fought north in the Boston area. We've heard of Ticonderoga. Okay, we've heard of the battles in the South, but not too many battles in New Jersey other than the Battle of Trenton. That's the only one that we know of. And this battle at Connecticut Farms, what I learned, was a major battle in New Jersey. What happened was that it was in the summer of 1780, which was right after the bitter winter they had that year. And in New York was the British Army, accompanied by an army of Hessians. And 6,000 of the soldiers, British soldiers and Hessians, crossed the Hudson River into Staten Island and made their way into New Jersey for the purpose of crossing the state and proceeding to Morristown, where they would destroy Washington's army that was located there and take away their ammunition and provisions, and by doing so, preventing the colonists' ability to continue fighting war. Well, one of the things that's interesting that I also didn't learn, which I found from my reading, was that in 1777, the militias were formed in northern New Jersey. And they had a brigadier general in charge of 1,000 men who were farmers, local men, untrained in the military, and he sent out a flyer to all these men and had people distributed to them and told them that you must be ready. When the British Army comes over, there will be horsemen traveling throughout the counties to gather together and bring your rifles and your guns, and if you don't have weapons, bring your pitchforks and your knives. And we will meet them in the field and we will stop them. Okay? And that's what happened in the summer of 1780. They crossed the river. The British thought this was a joke because when the letter was written by the general, his English was terrible. He didn't know how to spell words. And his messages were improperly given, but the men understood what it was. And the message went out, and the militias from both counties proceeded to meet with the British Army, and they fought them at the Battle of Connecticut Farm, and another battle at Springfield. But before the battle began, the militia would line up on the sides of the pathways that they came and fire at them from the woods. And the British and the Hessians were taking soldiers. And when they had suffered 385 casualties, they determined this is not going the way we planned, and they turned around to go back to the state of New York. And it was at that time that Jimenez Brown met his downfall. As I continue research, I found a book published in 1814. It was written by a Reverend Timothy Alden, who had visited a number of Revolutionary War era cemeteries and copied the inscriptions he found interesting. His book was titled A Collection of American Inscriptions and Epitaphs. In the book I had found, he had recorded the inscription of my relative Jimenez Brown's tombstone. The tombstone was found to be in the old Reformed church, but he was not one of the 66 revolutionary soldiers that were known to have been buried there. What happened was that several years after the war, loyalists came and destroyed his headstone, broke it into pieces. And this reverend in 1814 was able to come by and put those pieces together and read the epitaph that was written on the stone. The epitaph said, Jimenez Brown, son of Henry and Rachel Brown, died 8th of June, 1780, in his 18th year of age. And the epitaph was, behold me here as you pass by, who died for liberty. From British tyrants, now I'm free. My friends, prepare to follow me. And that was the message he gave to his brothers. That was the message on his tombstone that he may not have put there, but Henry Brown and his relatives who were in this battle with him put that on his tombstone so that his fellow countrymen could see that even if I lost my son at the battle in the war, he was calling upon you to join and continue the fight for liberty. I want you to imagine, if you could, how they went about doing this. Back in those days, when a soldier was killed on a battlefield, they buried the soldiers on the battlefield. But Henry Brown had a family plot at the cemetery and intended for his sons and him and whatever relatives he could be buried there. So from this battlefield down by Elizabeth, Henry Brown and his 2 nephews and his brother carried the body of his son 10 miles, 12 miles up to the family plot in Belleville, New Jersey. And when they brought him home, his wife, the boy's mother, got to see him with a hole in his chest the size of a cannonball. He died from that cannonball. Another man died from that cannonball. And a third man who signed the deposition lost the fingers on his hand as a result of that same cannonball. And when he wrote his deposition, he said, I lost my hands, and he gave the names of the 2 men who died with him. That, gentlemen and ladies, is a remarkable story, if I may. It tells us the way the men at that time considered liberty to be an important function for our country. And they were not afraid to sacrifice their sons and daughters, if necessary, in defense of those liberties, to give us the legacies that we have today, that we enjoy and we share. And today, what's odd today is that things happen so quickly. We don't appreciate that. Back then, things happened slowly. The Declaration of Independence was signed in 1776, but they're fighting battles in New Jersey in 1780. It's a slow war. It's a slow pace, and they live with this for a long time. On behalf of Hermanus Brown, on behalf of the Brown family, on behalf of the veterans of Nutley, New Jersey, and Essex County, northern New Jersey, who served in the Revolutionary War, on behalf of the veterans who served in all the wars, who served in the First World War. If you go outside the library, you will see a monument from the men who served in the Second World War. 2,800 men from Nutley served in the Second World War. And on that same monument is a list of 80 men whose families got gold stars. That means they died in the war. And their families received notice of it. We are honoring Hermanus Brown because his name was forgotten for 2 centuries. 235 years we have forgotten where he was buried. We didn't know. And when it was recognized, we're not going to forget. And his name will be included in our Hall of Fame. The monuments that are at the cemetery are being changed and corrected. A new headstone is being put up with the epitaph on it to honor his memory. And I say to you on behalf of them, thank you, and we will never forget again. Thank you very much.
I am sure Private Hermanus Brown would be very impressed by the footprint of this nation today, for what he gave the ultimate sacrifice for. Our next inductee, Richard Albanese.
Thank you for this induction. Thank you, Nutleyites, for being here. And I've had such pleasure already meeting my fellow inductees. I'm honored to be a doctor. And candidly, I'm merely moved as someone who worked for the military for 40 years by your story. I came to Nutley with my family, Walnut Street in Hathaway Down, when I was in middle school. And I gloried in the fields of Nutley, and the Little League and the Babe Ruth League. And I hope the children here today still enjoy that active extracurricular life. It was so meaningful for me, coming from Jacob Street and Springfield Avenue where there was no grass. I learned so much from family, from teachers, from coaches, in middle and in high school. Life lessons I use every day. And I just want to share with you one lesson from Coach Deach. I was the worst player he ever had to coach. But he put me in a JV game one day. fellow on the opposite team came across the line before the count and really knocked me down. After a few periods of dizziness, I got up and thought I had hit the dirt literally, because there was marble-like material in my mouth. I trotted over to the sideline where Coach Beach was, spit out these white things. And he said, "Dick, what's the matter?" I said, "Coach, I got something in my mouth." He said, "Oh, probably your teeth." "Let me have them. Go back in the next play." I've lived by that rule since. You know, when you're 75 years old, you get kicked down a lot. And the key thing is that you get up, spit out your teeth, and go in the next play. So, thanks to a lot of help, I got into college, family, friends, relatives, neighbors. Miss Julia Butler, who is recognized in this library, just lived up the street from me. Harold, her son, was my best friend. He never got up on time for school, and he never finished his breakfast. So I'm sitting in her living room, and she has books. Oh, she loves books. I looked, she said, "Try." And after years, after 2 weeks, I would finish the book, and she would sit with me and say, "What did it mean? What did you learn? Did you know this word? Did you know this word?" Now, my teachers at high school were wonderful, but I really think it's because of Mrs. Butler that I got good SATs. And I'm so pleased that she's honored in this library. She meant so much to me. I got into medical school at Columbia, and at that time, Vietnam was very hot. So the military came to the school and said they needed doctors, and they thought they'd be a doctor's grad. Every decision of any consequence is composed of many things, I think. I didn't like the idea of waiting for a chance event to happen. Would I be drafted? Would I not? I wanted to land. So one major reason was I could know when I go in, if I chose and volunteered. There's another thing. Uncle Ed, Uncle Tilly, Cousin Frank. A large portion of my family had served in World War II and in Korea. And I knew I wasn't going to like myself if I didn't go. But I realized today there's something else. There's a feeling in Nutley about patriotism, about loving the country. I remember the football games, the flag. I remember the Pledge of Allegiance in school. And I believe this country is worth fighting for, as you articulated. So I volunteered. My first tour of duty, I served the pilots and crew of the B-52 and the B-1 bombers during Vietnam. Then I went into the Ready Reserve and was assigned a lieutenant colonel's position in the civil service, the Civil Air Force Service, which allowed my family to stay in one place while I stayed at one base. My wife is a psychiatrist, Helen, and this was very important for her, I believe. I stayed in for 40 years minus 18 days. They were in one place, but I was gone for 5 years. And I'm grateful to Helen and my children for their patience. I want to very briefly just give you an idea of what a physician does in the military. I'll go through the military part and then medical part. In 1973, Iraq, Syria, Jordan, and Egypt flooded into Israel, began the Holy War, that holy day for that community, and they tried to push them, man, woman, and child, into the Mediterranean. I'm so proud that our nation decided to work against that effect, to help. I led a team that did the scheduling from the United States through the Azores into what was then called Lowe Air Force Base, now Tel Aviv Airport in Israel. And we rejoiced when those four nations were pushed back. And I knew then I would not leave the service. During the Reagan administration, you might remember that there was a reorganization of the military. And his administrators asked that there be a top-to-bottom study of how we were handling casualties, our own and potential enemy casualties. And I was part of that effort to pre-place physicians, nurses, medics, material, blood, medicines of all kinds, to catalog and understand what modern warfare might mean to casualties. I knew President Reagan was using our preparedness in his discussions with Mr. Gorbachev. And you better believe I had a beer when the wall came down. When the wall came down. I thought that was going to change my life, and more importantly, my children's life. That if I had a son or a grandson, they wouldn't have to volunteer. That it wasn't to be, though. Soon, ethnic, sectarian issues, radical Islam. And I served technical requirements in Iraq, Afghanistan, and again, issues of anti-terrorism at this time in Israel. So at 75, nearly 75, it amazes me to think of the slice of history I've seen. It hurts my heart to have seen it. I wish it hadn't happened. But I'm satisfied that I did my best to make things as good as possible. Medically, I'm a Vietnam veteran. When the vets came home, they showed a strange constellation of illnesses that didn't make any sense. We started thinking about it, studying it, surveys, reading. Considered what they were exposed to. Uranium tip shells are used. That's toxic. Herbicides were used to reduce ambushes, and that worked. But the herbicides are toxic. And we finally identified the herbicides, Agent Orange, as causing the illness. I'm proud to say that I led that team. I'm proud to say that I advocated that compensation, testified in Congress. I'm proud to say I fought some pretty big companies who wanted to take me down. Now 650,000 men and women are helped with their illnesses. But I'd like to tell you a little thing, a little story that makes it all worthwhile for me. I have a daughter, Lara, who's a physician. And she was working at a VA hospital 10 years ago. And a Vietnam vet said to her, "Doc, you know, I got this non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. I wouldn't be able to have this treatment if it wasn't for a tough, somewhat crazy guy in San Antonio." My daughter called me that night, and she said only one sentence: "Dad, now I understand." other side of medicine, my first love is radiation oncology, radiation imaging. I have developed a method extending the MRI in such a way that if you have material in your body, a chemical that's not supposed to be there, I can make a first estimate of what that chemical is. My dream for radiological work is that one day you're going to be able to walk into a doctor's office and in 5 minutes we'll be able to scan your body at the cellular and tissue level to know if you have incipient cancer. And use then non-invasive techniques, pinpoint the radiation and move it. That's one of the major scientific goals I have in my retirement work. I'm a son of Nutley. Everything I experienced here was good. Family, sports, teachers. I don't know if any of you remember, but I lived on Bowman Street and Satterway Avenue, and I'd go down 1 block to the fields of ITT. We played baseball all day there, skated under the tower, swam in the pool. Please stay so loving to your young, because it gives them the basis for happiness. What I've learned in my life is this. Service to others for self. That's the only authentic path to happiness. And you gave me that. Thank you.
Wonderful. Now accepting the award for Ken Yulo, Sam Stellatella.
Sammy Stellatella from Nutley, New Jersey. I only wish I was Kenny Yulo. And I'm very jealous of Kenny Yulo. Not because he's going into the Hall of Fame, but that's a well-deserved honor. I have something here I want to show you. This is Kenny Yulo's yearbook picture. This guy should have been in Hollywood as a leading man. And he was the sharpest dresser in Nutley High. Now in 2010, I was with Kenny Yulo at his house. And my daughter was down in Florida running a marathon. And I brought him this shirt. He's trim, doesn't have an ounce of body fat on him. He's got all his hair, he's got all his teeth, and he doesn't have a wrinkle on his face. He looks like he's 30. But there's a rumor that there's a portrait in his attic that's aging. Now, Kenny Yulo was a year behind me at Nutley High, and I played football with him. He was a tailback on the football team single wing. He was maybe 5'7", 5'8", 140 pounds. And our wing back was Joe Nitti, who was the same size. They were called the Mighty Mites. The fullback in that backfield was Joe Cascia. Joe Nitti and Kenny Yulo were small, very fast, and very tough. In '55, Sandy Phillips' first year, we were 7-2, losing to Montclair a 13-6, and to Orange 18-14. A lineman picked up the ball late in the game and scored, and they beat us. But Kenny Yulo was key to that 7-2 record. Now, I left Nutley in 1956 to go to Penn State. Kenny Yulo was a year behind me, I never saw Kenny for 50 years. I had heard that he was in show business. In my mind, he was painting scenery and moving furniture on stages. I had no idea what he was doing. Then there was a rumor around town that Kenny Eula was dead. So Lizzie Gingarelli calls me up. They were having the 50th reunion for the class of 57. She wanted me to go in order to take pictures. I went. Kenny Eula was there. And from that point on, we made contact, and it has been a very close relationship since then. Now, I didn't realize from talking to him that he was a major producer, director, wrote books, and worked with all these big names in show business. Now, in 2010, when that picture was taken with him with the Nutley shirt, my daughter, who was 45 at the time, signed up to run a marathon at Disney World. And on Saturday, it was January 9th, it was her 45th birthday. So she ran a half a marathon. It was the coldest in Florida since the Ice Age. And so Kenny Eula arranged reservations at a terrific Italian restaurant, and we had a birthday party for her. And I invited Nicky Figueredo from Nutley, who was a buddy of mine, a teammate and a classmate. He came down with his wife. Pete Udick came down. Pete Udick was a year ahead of me, was a great athlete. So we had a mini reunion and a birthday party. The next day, my daughter ran a full marathon. Now, when you run these marathons in Disney World, they give you a medallion. And the one you want is the Goofy medallion. You have to run both the half marathon and the marathon. Oh, by the way, yesterday, my daughter, who is now 50, ran a 50-mile race in Maryland. It took her 11 and a half hours. So, when I told Kenny that I was coming down for the marathon, he insisted that I stay at his house, and I did stay at his house. Now, when I heard that he was going into the whole thing, I was all excited. I was very happy for him. And when he asked me to stand in for him, I said, if they'll allow it, I'd be more than happy to stand in for you. And he sent me a copy of the acceptance speech. I told him, just don't put any big words in there. Dear friends, guests, and esteemed members of the Nutley Hall of Fame Committee, thank you for inducting me into the Nutley Hall of Fame. It is an honor I will cherish for the rest of my life, especially since I still call Nutley my home. I can assure you that any success in my life has been directly related to geography. Born and raised in Nutley certainly had its advantages, and I am convinced that my writing and directing career was affirmed by those transient years. All those lush parks and brooks and streams meandering through the very heart of Nutley were so gloriously vast to the imagination of a boy, and the close-knit neighborhoods and people who allowed me the freedom to explore allowed Nutley for me to become the kingdom I wanted it to be as a child. Nutley was and still is a wonderful place to live, filled with caring and sharing and talented people. It is on behalf of the people of Nutley that I humbly accept the award, those people who unknowingly helped me shape my life. I can't list them all here, but I always be forever grateful to Coach Ralph DeAndrea, Lou's work, and teaching me discipline, decency, and courage. For Dean Harry Bennett and Principal Edward Asmus for their generosity of spirit and the wisdom of their guidance. For the wonderful staff at the Nutley Library, who I consider my magic carpet into a serious intellectual life, who allowed me to often teach a creative dramatic class there for 3 to 6-year-olds, and advised me that books contain powerful amulets that could lead to paths of certain wisdom. And for all my friends at Nutley Little Theater who were gracious enough to let me direct my first play there, The Diary of Anne Frank, and who produced the first play that I'd written, The Neighbors. Standing there on graduation day, class of '57, I knew that I had been given a great education, great opportunity, and generous support of my peers, and was more than ready to pursue my dreams. 4 years later, I was in the Army's 503 Aviation Company, guarding the Berlin Wall. Now, he told me that he was servicing U-2 planes, Gary Powers' U-2 plane. And he said that the U-2s flew so high it was impossible for the Russians to shoot them down. And Gary Powers had a cyanide pill. If he was ever captured, he was supposed to take the cyanide pill. And he said that the U-2 planes were not equipped to carry these large cameras. And every time they returned to base, they crashed and damaged the cameras. And he was in California after his military service, and there was an ad in the paper for an automobile. He went and he bought that automobile. It belonged to Gary Powers' mother. Yeah. Guarding the Berlin Wall, and became the artistic director of the Frankfurt Playhouse in Frankfurt, Germany. Once back stateside, I opened up my own theater in New York, the Courtyard Playhouse, where I had the privilege of working with some of New York's finest actors, including Al Pacino, Dustin Hoffman, Julie Harris, Jodie Foster, and Robert De Niro. Also Zero Mostel. Once again, Nutley was close by, and my mother and father were still living there, as were most of my friends. So I traveled back to Nutley on weekends to wallow in my roots. Each time I leave Nutley, I toss backward calls of gladness and gratitude, which always echoed behind me long after I had gone. For it is well to remember, to celebrate and remember from whence you came. So I accept this word on behalf of the good and kind folks of Nutley, because there at the center, solidly planted, are the people. Whether working stage, screen, or TV, I find that whether it is at the center of our lives will be the source of our security, guidance, wisdom, and the driving force of our energy. When we fearlessly fight for what we believe in and remain hopelessly optimistic about life, love, and the future, we create the authentic connection with all our pets. Most importantly, ourselves. In the end, this is really all that matters. Thank you for bestowing upon me this great honor. Respectfully and sincerely, Kenny Yulo.
Our next inductee, Tom Francisco.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the honor of being inducted into the Nutley. My wife had pointed out to me in the roster there that one of my teachers, James Carlin, is on the list of honors, and he was, when I was going to Nutley High, I was trying to decide where I was going to go in this. Whether I was going to be an artist, or I was going to become a tree surgeon, or a lumberjack out in Oregon. And luckily, I was able to, as an elective, have Mr. San Giovanni as my art teacher. And he encouraged me through 4 years of art, which as an elective you were supposed to only have 1 year. And because of his influence, I was able to take 4 years of art. And he was able to find, he found the North School of Fine Industrial Art for me, as I couldn't afford to go to any New York schools at the time. And it was very inexpensive, and I was able to pay for it on my own. And George Carlin was one of my teachers. And James Carlin, I'm sorry. Thank you, Barbara. I made the mistake earlier and I made it again. I wish I could speak like George Carlin. But James Carlin was a really inspiring teacher and artist. And one of the things that he inspired me, as well as Mr. San Giovanni, was taking a broad range of art skills and develop your own style and your own method of creating art. And when I was at North School of Fine and Industrial Art, I found so many incredibly talented people that we became very competitive, and we strove to be better than the other. And part of that influence I learned in Nutley High School, being a wrestler. Mr. Suffern was one of my coaches, and he really enforced a discipline and a really strong work ethic. And I've kept that throughout my entire life. In my social development, as well as my fine art development and photography. Once coming out of North School of Fine and Industrial Art, right out of school, I started my own business, and with another fellow student. It lasted for a very short period of time. We had the creative skills, the energy, the momentum to make it work, but what they didn't teach us was the business side of things. So it failed after a little while, and I went to work for what was back then Bamberger's. So I got a very, very good, furthered my education there, learning about technology and how production worked within the real world of industrial art and commercial art. And through my several years of working for them, I wound up meeting a number of people that were as creative, I felt, as I was, and we decided to open up another business. And when we decided to go into the photography business, we opened up a shop in Newark, New Jersey, on Academy Street. And I sprung that little information on my wife, and we rented a building, and she came down with my partner's wife. They walked into the building and burst out into tears because it was such a dilapidated, basically a bombed out, sheltered kind of building. But we gutted it, we built it up, we made it work. And from that point on, we became quite successful. And we chose the name of North Light Visual Communications. So we wound up doing not only photography, but graphic design. And we wound up working for the Hamburgers at the time, was one of our biggest clients. We worked for many pharmaceutical companies in New Jersey. And we started doing work for advertising agencies and graphic designers as well. So we were doing our own graphic design, but we're also providing photography for many of these outside design firms. So through the years, we were able to compete against some of the biggest graphic design firms and photography studios in New Jersey and New York, and remained successful to the point where we were kind of thought of as the leaders of photography in New Jersey. As technology creeped into the photography industry, we had to continually upgrade and learn computers and different ways of processing films. And we were working with large format cameras, 8x10 cameras, the old box cameras that you might see in old movies. That was the typical high grade, high quality photography that we were always thought of as, or the projects required. But as technologies grew, digital came into being, and we had to learn computers, we had to learn digital photography, and we always stayed ahead of the curve, and it kept us very, very successful. The part of my career has always been involved in the fine art side of photography as well as design, and I've been leaning towards doing more fine art work, and I've been working with creating dimensional work, collage material, and mixed media work. So I've been showing my work in that respect quite successfully lately. We recently had a showing in the Trenton Museum where I had 3 pieces accepted. So it was a juried show. It was accepted, and I had 3 of my pieces into that show, which was based on the politics of art. And it was a very, very well received show. I think that's about it. But thank you very much for your induction into the Hall of Fame, and I'm very, very happy to be here.
Our next inductee, Susan Naruki.
Thank you very much. I'm incredibly honored to be here today. I'm blown away and so pleased to be part of such a distinguished group of inductees. It's really an honor and a privilege, and I'm so thankful to be back here, to be among you and to talk a little bit about what I do, and to thank you and the community for putting the arts into the mix in this series of inductions into the Hall of Fame. I grew up in Belleville, graduated from Belleville High in 1975, and I lived in Nutley for over 20 years. I lived in a lot of other places too. When I think about, this age, this stage of life, you start to think about what makes sense in your life. What's the overarching theme? Who are you? I'm going to be 60 in 2 years. I'm 58. I've been a professional singer now for almost 30 years. And I started thinking, well, how did this all happen? And, when I was a kid, I collected maps. I was obsessed with maps. When I was 7 years old, apparently I wrote to every state in the Union, because you could do that then, and asked the Chamber of Commerce for a map. I wanted to see what the maps of our entire country looked like. And I would look at these maps, and I was fascinated by the routes and the topography and the names of states and all this information of places that I'd never been to, which seems kind of crazy. But in my mind, I was fascinated. So what did I do with my life? I became a person who looks at musical scores, figures out the detail that's in those scores, and learns how to bring them to life. It makes sense to me that even from an early age, I was interested in the landscape of the imagination. That was what I really wanted to do. I wanted to find a way to transfer symbols and ideas and make them into living art. And I was so lucky that I found music. I don't come from a family of musicians, professional musicians, but the first time I heard music was listening to my father sing in the car. My father, John DeRupi, who actually passed away 23 years ago today. Just thought that one. And he had the most beautiful baritone voice. When I was a child, I sat in the car, and anytime he opened his mouth, I was riveted. What he usually was singing were country western songs, Hank Williams, Nat King Cole songs. He loved it. He was a crooner. He had the most beautiful voice. And although not all members of my family appreciated it as much as I did, when I was a child, I remember thinking, that's magic. It's magic that someone can do that. So it's no surprise to me that after I learned to speak, I started singing. It's just something that I wanted to do. When I was a child, I remember skipping to school, to number 7 school in Belleville, and having other children make fun of me because I was singing constantly. Well, it's okay. It's just a funny memory. And part of what led me to become a professional musician was actually those early experiences I had, not just listening to my father sing, but being in a public school system, as Belleville did in those days, that had an absolutely magnificent music program. Even in first grade, second grade, all through high school, we had the opportunity to sing in choruses, to learn instruments, and to get individual lessons in different instruments, and to try different things out. I played in orchestra, I played in band, a marching band. I played lots of instruments, some better than others. I always sang, and I had the benefit of working with some absolutely world-class musicians who just happened to be teaching in the Belleville public school system. Frank Shelba, Tom Finetti, the late Tom Finetti, who was an absolutely wonderful pianist. Mr. Carr, our choral teacher. It was the kind of introduction to music that I think is so critical, was so critical for me, and actually led me into exploring music at a young age without having to have a lot of extra lessons. It was something that was just offered as part of the public school system. And I can't tell you enough how important that was for me to discover who I was. I mean, I was a musician. Anyone who's an artist here knows that there's a moment in your life when you see something or you hear something or you experience it and you say, oh, that's me. That's my home. That's part of who I am. That's where I belong. And having those early experiences with my father and with the Belleville public school system, the music program was absolutely incredible and led me to find who I wanted to be. But I didn't become a country western music singer, or I didn't become a pop singer. I became fascinated with classical music. And why? Well, for those of you, how many of you sing in here? Is anybody sitting? I'll make you do it now, right in the shower. You know, I got excited by not only the physical act of singing and how great it felt, but the idea that you could take emotions and poems and great literature and transform it into music. And that's what happens. That's opera, that's classical art singing, which is a lot of what I do. Just as people do in visual art, music is constantly transforming. There are living composers. There are people who are still trying to figure out wonderful ways to make this sophisticated and gorgeous art form into something new. And that's what I got interested in. In my life, I've had the privilege of working with some great orchestras, great conductors, to sing in older works, Mozart, Handel, Bach, Beethoven, great works of classical music. But I've also had the privilege of working with living composers who are creating new works, trying something new, and bringing those works to the public. It's been an incredible privilege to be able to travel across the world and to do that. I've been able to sing in every country in Europe and in Asia, Australia, all throughout the United States. For 27 years, 30 years now, yeah. Reading maps, figuring out, reading those maps, and figuring out how to make things, how to make music alive, how to make these pieces come to life. Because music is a living thing. We need to keep renewing the arts in order for them to be relevant, in order to find what's going to speak to our everyday life. And a lot of the music that I've been involved with might not be music that you hear on the radio now. It might not be music that's popular on television, but these might be works that speak to our lives and that live on. And it's been a great privilege to be a part of that process. I also want to say something about living in this area, about, and it's funny, it's just coming to me now as I'm listening to everyone here. People often ask me why I still consider Nutley home, which I do. I've lived now in California in San Diego for 8 years. I teach at the University of California in San Diego, joined the faculty there, and I'm a professor of music there. It's a great privilege to be part of a research university and part of a great program. But when people say to me, so what are you doing for Christmas? I say, I'm going home. And home means Nutley. Why is it home? Well, my mom, who's not with us today, but still is with us, lives in Belleville. So of course, I want to see her as much as I possibly can. I still have wonderful friends from my high school. One of them here is today. My friend Lauren is here today, who are still an important part of my life. Why do I consider this home? It's because it's real. I find Nutley to be a wonderful, real community. And I don't mean to be flip about this at all, but if you ask someone in California to meet you for lunch, they will say, yes, sure, and you will never see them. And that is true. But if I say to one of my friends here, let's go out and have dinner, let's get together, we'll set a time, we'll show up, and we'll be there. It's a place, I've seen Nutley change in 20 years. 20 years that I've lived here, quite a bit. New restaurants coming in, new parking lots in town, new infrastructure, but there's always something that seems really vibrant and alive about this very small town. It's full of people doing good things and good works. And I think that's one of the things that I take away from growing up in this area, is a community of people who care. Being at the University of California now, I do less performing, less traveling than I used to, but I have the opportunity to actually create new projects. And one of them you've heard mentioned is an opera project called Cuatro Corridos. That means 4 corridos. The Mexican corrido is a lyric narrative poem that's usually sung by men and generally a tragic poem. The opera Cuatro Corridos is an opera about a very difficult and serious subject. It's about the trafficking of women across the U.S.-Mexican border. And when I moved to San Diego, I had no idea that this was It's not just a Mexican-US problem. What I've learned since then is it's an international problem. It takes place in the labor force. There's labor trafficking, unfortunately sex trafficking as well. It's prevalent all across the world. And I finally found myself in a position at this stage of life to say, you know, I'm tired of, I've had a wonderful career singing other people's music and being a part of the great stages of the world, singing at Carnegie Hall, singing at, you know, Lincoln Center, making recordings. But now I want to do something that actually uses my voice to do something that's far more important, which is to draw attention to an issue that's absolutely critical in our time. And I'm very pleased to say that our project has traveled throughout the United States and in Mexico, and we've structured it so that we present a performance of an opera that's an hour long, that I perform in with 3 wonderful colleagues. We combine that with forums on human trafficking that happen after the performance so that people can actually learn something about this problem and what can be done about it. Because for me, I think the thing I've learned is that, you know, music and art don't exist in a vacuum. They exist and they're part of our contemporary life. They have the power to affect change. And that's really the most important thing that any of us can do, is to move the world, just as everybody here has described, to move the world in a positive direction and affect change and make the world a better place. So, if I were to say why I'm standing in front of you, I'd say it's really for 4 reasons. And the first reason is my father. When I asked him what I should do with my life, he always said, Sue, do what makes you happy. And I think he had no idea that I would do this. But I took him at his word. That's the thing he always said, is to do what makes you happy. The second reason is my mother, Viola, who taught me to be honest and to always stand up for what's right. I don't even think she ever had to say it, but just because of the person that she is, that's what I learned. The third reason is this amazing community that I was a part of that gave me music, that introduced me to music and provided a wonderful, strong, and secure place to grow up. And the fourth is my group of friends, an amazing group of people from high school, a group of women. We learned to support each other in pursuing our dreams, and we still do. And I feel really fortunate to have had that constellation to make my life. It's been an amazing, amazing journey, and I'm so thrilled that this is part of it. So thank you all so much.
Our next inductee, accepting the award for Jackie Paris, Anthony Iannarone.
Last one. I'm standing between you and all that great food, puts me under a lot of pressure here. You know, I don't know how you feel about what you've heard today, but I tend to personalize it. For example, Mr. Rookie, I also went to Belleville High School, only 27 years before she did. And we mentioned Julia Butler. Mr. Butler started the first of the book funds here at Nutley. They've now grown to over $470,000. And there's a plaque to Mrs. Butler, which is in the periodicals room. The reason why the plaque is where it is, because of the conversation I had with Mr. Butler. And if you stand in front of that plaque, and the blinds are open in the ogive window, the cross of Vincent Church is in the window looking over the plaque. These are what, you know, when you're here a long time, these are the things you know that other people don't. Sam, talking about his daughter in the marathons. In the last 2 years, my granddaughter has run a 50-mile race, a 51-mile race, the Paris Marathon, the Rome Marathon, and she's run Boston 3 times, and on, Philadelphia, Richmond, Marie Marathon, runners or something. Anyway, I'm here to talk not about me, but about Jackie Paris. And maybe I'm the wrong one because I'm not a jazz musician or a jazz aficionado, and I didn't know Jackie Paris. I'm more of a classical music person, but I've, in my various studies, learned to appreciate music, and I learned that there are 3 types of music. There's music for the mind, there's music for the heart, and there's music for the feet. And in that sense, Jackie Paris was transcendental. I wouldn't compare him in jazz to Brahms, Beethoven, Bach, or Mozart, but certainly he would be in the line of enduring musicians such as Vivaldi and that. So maybe not a titan, but certainly a giant. And I think that, like classical music, jazz music will also be enduring. For example, a classical fan will turn on music, WQXR, that was written 250 years ago, and still enjoy it. And I think that will be the same thing with jazz. I remember when I was at Hoffman LaRoche, the Grand General Counsel of the whole international company came over here, and what did Dr. de Graffenried want to do? He wanted to go to a jazz club. That was his enduring wish while he was in the United States. Jackie Paris was certainly among the giants. He worked with the best and the brightest. Thelonious Monk. He recorded a lot of. He's not only a guitarist, and if you compared him to the classics, he certainly would be up there with a Giuliani or a Segovia. And I'm sure if he wanted to, he could have done classical guitar music, as many jazz musicians did. I just heard a trombone piece the other day by one of the noted jazz players. But he was also a great singer. And fortunately for jazz aficionados, his music is recorded, and people are playing it today. And I kind of think they'll still be playing it a long, long time into the future. So we're very proud as Nutleyites and as members of the committee to welcome Jackie Paris into the Hall of Fame. If you please look at the tree when you go down, there are so many great people there, and most Nutleyites have never heard of them before. And that's what we're here for. We're here to make Nutley proud to know that we have people like our class today. And our great photographer, our great singer, our great physician, we just welcome them all. So look, there's some great food, really enjoy it. I'm sorry, we're way beyond our scheduled time, so I'll quit right now. Thank you.
Normally at this time, the mayor, Al Petracca, would be present to perform this part of the ceremony. He intended to be here and last minute had a conflict. So with the authority and me as the chair of the Nutley Hall of Fame, on behalf of the administrative staff and the judges, I officially give you the class of 2015.